not going to... Oh, fuck. Stupid
What?
chair's in the way.
We're not moving that shit. Oh, I guess we...
Oh, God damn it. Welcome to Stormin Chocolate. I'm Stormin Norman. This week we're doing Choronzon from Tangerine Dream and the album Exit. Choronzon is the third of 6 songs from 1981's Exit. Choronzon is a demon that appeared in the occultist literature in the 16th century. In the 20th century, the demon became a central part of the Thelema movement. This movement, this mystical movement, was founded by Aleister Crowley, where the demon was known as the dweller in the abyss, where he was known as the last obstacle that adepts needed to overcome in order to reach the pinnacle of their powers. Thelemites believe that if the demon is met with the proper preparation, then his function is to destroy the ego, causing ego death, which allows the adept to move beyond the abyss of occult cosmology. But that's the last we're going to talk about this. Choronzon, up until the point that I read that paragraph inside Wikipedia, I had no idea what it meant, but in preparation of this video, I thought I should take a look at where it came from. And boy, was I surprised. And we'll talk about more of that at the end of the video.
It sounds like a hot dog. Like a spicy hot dog.
That's not helpful. So, Choronzon is the third of 6 songs on the album Exit, which came out in 1981. It came out between the albums Thief, which is a soundtrack album, and White Eagle, which was the subsequent studio album. Now, this CD, this album, may have been the 4th or the 5th or the 6th or the 7th Tangerine Dream album that I bought. I don't remember at the time. I was buying every one that I could find, every one that I could afford, because I was really getting into this long play instrumental music that they were doing. I also saw the movies Thief and Risky Business, for which Tangerine Dream did the soundtracks. They also did soundtracks of many others. We'll talk about a handful of them in a second. But I really liked Thief and I loved Risky Business. So all of the music, the Making Love on a Real Train, that's Tangerine Dream music from the soundtrack. There's a couple of singles that are on there. There's Swamp from the Talking Heads. That's a single on there. There's a Prince song that's on the soundtrack. And those are on kind of like side 2 of the LP of that soundtrack, but that's kind of the time frame that we're talking about. In 1986, which was about the time that I bought this particular album, Exit, Tangerine Dream had 11 studio albums to their name, including the first 4, which were more experimental, and Tangerine Dream hadn't really hit the ground running. They were still up in the, and I'm going to make a pun, in the stratosphere with their thinking and their experimentation. And then once we got down to the first of the real albums, which were Phaedra and Rubicon, they were much more consistent in their creation of the songs. Now they've evolved over time so that those first 2 or 3 albums, which kind of define what we call the Virgin years, where the albums were released on Virgin Records, all the way down to the Eastgate years and the TDI years, which happened in the 90s and the aughts. So in addition to 11 studio albums, Tangerine Dream also had 9 soundtracks by this time, by the mid-80s, which include songs I've already named, like Thief and Risky Business, but also other soundtracks such as Sorcerer, Wavelength, and Firestarter. So you may not realize all of the soundtracks they've done. So if you look at the Wikipedia page, you'll see they've done soundtracks to some 40 or 50 different theatrical releases or video cassettes. So there's a video album called Canyon Dreams, which is about whitewater rafting in Utah or on the Colorado River specifically, and they did the sound to that. There's another video sequence called Architecture in Motion, and or The Beauty of the Blast, and they did the soundtrack to that. And we'll talk about those later because a lot of those songs are in the list when we get to them, once we get through the top 14. Until Exit, most albums only had a handful of songs, no more than 4, I believe. And many of the songs were simply album sides. For example, Phaedra had 1 album side length song and then 3 songs on the second side. Rubicon had 2 songs, one on side 1 and one on side 2. Stratosphere had 2 songs on side one that was 10 minutes long, one is 5 minutes, and an 8-minute song and an 11.5-minute song on side 2. Cyclone on side 1 had a 13-minute song and a 5-minute song, and then side 2 was a 20-minute song. Force Majeure had an 18-minute song on side 1 and a 7.5 and an 11.5-minute song on side 2. And finally, Tangerine had 2 songs, one on side 1 and one on side 2, and they called it Tangerine Set 1 and Tangerine Set 2. So Exit has 6 songs, as I said at the top of this video, and they range in length from about 4 minutes to about 9 minutes, with an average about 5.5. And so as you heard the songs from the studio albums that I just listed, this is kind of unprecedented. So it gives you kind of a different feel if you listen to it in the context of its time. So things were kind of changing. There were still some live albums that were still, set 1 on one side of the album, set 2 on the second side of the album, and that's kind of the way that it worked. Choronzon is actually the shortest song on the album, coming in at 4 minutes and 7 seconds. However, it turned out to be so popular that in concert, they expanded the length of it. For example, in 1981, the first year that it was released and they played it in concert, in London, it was just over 10 minutes long. And then even in 1983, in the Osaka and the Tokyo concerts, for which there are recordings available, it was still 8.5 minutes long. And it kind of starts a little differently, and we'll talk about that more in a couple seconds, in concert than it does on the album. So the way that the album's cut starts is it just starts with a basic beat. So it's kind of a drum machine, but it may not be a drum machine. It may just be synthesizers because they don't really sound like real drums, but it could have been a drum machine they were using with a sequencer in order to get the beats down where they wanted them to. And then they sent the sounds that came out for each of the sounds, the toms and the hi-hat, through some noise generating devices, because there's basically 2 different beats for the basic beat. There is the hi-hat, which operates at 16th notes, and there are toms, which operate at a combination of 8th notes and quarter notes. And it starts with just the hi-hat continuously hitting at 18. But before the counter melody comes in, you hear the hi-hat actually get really distorted, and it kind of goes in waves, and it gets more distorted and it gets clearer and stuff like that. Never sounds like a real hi-hat, but it's there sounding kind of like a spray can. You spray, it's just spraying all over the place. But the toms start with a specific beat that starts right at the beginning. So there's 4 8th note hits and then a couple quarter note hits in each bar, and it just repeats. At the same time that the hi-hat is just going all the time, 16th notes. And that happens for a couple of bars, and then the counter melody comes in, and the counter melody is kind of structured the same way that the basic beat is structured, where you get 16th notes at the beginning as the toms are going bop, bop, bop. The counter melody comes in and do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. So you have this, it is kind of operating differently. I mean, it does change notes, whereas the toms don't. It's the same tom all over again. So this is the way that it runs at the basic beat, and it kind of runs all the way through the song until at the end of the album cut, you just get some noise of crescendos at the end, and then the beat kind of like they turn the volume down on it, and then the noise goes away, and that's the end of the song. It might be different in the concert how it ends, but how it begins in concert is you get kind of the same noise that you hear at the end, this crescendoing noise, it just goes around. And if you've seen the concerts before, because they did play the song for 5 or 6 years in the 80s, from 81 to 85, 86. So if you had seen concerts multiple times, you would recognize this song specifically because it's maybe the only song that started with the noise. And when you heard the noise and you were looking forward to the song being played, you would go crazy, as one is wont to do in a concert setting. So you hear the noise come up, and then there's kind of like a little delay as the noise builds, and then the beat comes in. It's the basic beat. And that's that every time I hear it, when it's in my playlist and the shuffles around to Choronzon, it's just, I have the same kind of anticipation when it starts. So throughout the song, to this basic beat, there's several different rhythm, I'll call them, and lead, I'll call them, synthesizers that come in and play different things at different times. So there's a progression, there's variability as you progress through the song. It's not boring. So in the last third of the song, you kind of have a bridge where you have some different instruments that are playing. They're not really playing to the beat anymore. They're just chaotic kind of instruments that are just swirling around and doing different things. And the wonderful thing about this particular bridge is when it all culminates and you can hear the sound or the sounds crescendo to a point at which they stop right on the beat at the beginning of the the 4-bar sequence. And that's just really satisfying, where everything has gone to chaos and then it all comes together. And I don't know if that has anything to do with the ego death and the adept getting to the other side of the abyss, but I digress. So one of the things that I heard as I was listening to the song again while I was writing the script for this video is that in addition to those interesting noises that were going on, thunderclaps and things like that, there was also a place where there was a chorus that I heard in the background. So it does kind of sound like voices, but of course, there are no singers usually in concert. But in this case, it would rise and it would fall, and it almost sounded like, it didn't sound like chanting so much as it sounded like a chorus singing up, singing down, singing notes, etc. And I thought that was kind of interesting, and I never noticed it. And I certainly didn't tie it to the demonology passage mentioning Aleister Crowley and others. So I keep mentioning the beat, and the reason is that not only does it start with the beat and pretty much end with the beat, but the beat just drives the song along, and it's really an infectious song, an infectious beat to me, where it's slow enough that you can tap to it and keep the rhythm going, in your body. But it's also fast enough to keep you moving. So it's kind of an upbeat in that regard. And to me, being at 98 BPM, it just seems to be a happy song. So it always makes me feel good. And that's one of the reasons why I love it. Now, a warning is that if you search for Choronzon on YouTube, if you wanted to go and investigate other recordings or other broadcasts of the song, and you don't use the links that are down in the description, you probably want to enter Tangerine Dream Choronzon into the search bar, because if you don't, then 90% of the results that you're going to get back are about that demon Choronzon, and I don't recommend that you look at any of those videos, those talks, those discussions, unless you're into that sort of thing. But if you're looking for music, it's a lot safer to add Tangerine Dream to it. In addition to the album cut, which there's a link to, there's also a cover by Azure State, which is pretty good. It follows very similar to the Tangerine Dream version, although it is slightly different. It is a cover, and it is a creative cover, so it's very nice. A year and a half ago, when I built the modular synthesizer that you can see videos for on this channel, but not in this playlist, I was listening to a lot of YouTubers who were reviewing modules, or they were reviewing other synthesizer components, or they were actually doing performances. So in my browser, I have a list of performing artists who are doing stuff on YouTube, and Azure State is one of the first ones and one of the best ones that I tuned into. In addition to the link to Azure State's cover of Choronzon, I've also provided a link to a site called Voices in the Net, where you can see all of Tangerine Dream's studio releases and all of their discography. In addition, they will show for a particular song where they performed it in concert around the world and through time. And that's where I got the information that said, in London, the version of Choronzon in 1981 was 10 minutes long, just over 10 minutes. And in Osaka and Tokyo, it was 8.5 minutes long. So that's kind of useful information to me. They can also help you find some of the unofficial bootleg recordings of the concerts. Tangerine Dream was very open about having their concerts recorded, and some of them are better than others. Some of them are people with a tape recorder in the audience recording it. May not be great, but it does give you an idea of how Tangerine Dream sounded at that time in that location. Some of the recordings were done over the radio. I believe there's one in Washington, D.C., where it was broadcast live over, it could have been, public radio. And occasionally you'll hear the, not the commercial breaks, but the time when the station has to broadcast its call letters and its frequency. Because, the FCC requires that stations identify themselves occasionally. And some of the recordings were taken from the mixing board. Maybe somebody knew the guy who was doing the mixing at the venue and was able to plug it in there. And ironically, some of the recordings that appear in this group of recordings, which they call Tangerine Leaves and Tangerine Trees, actually became official Tangerine Dream CD releases. And I have some of those. I have almost every Tangerine Dream CD that was released before 2000. So that's it for Choronzon. I hope you enjoy the song as much as I do. I hope you give it a listen. Next time, we will head east to where it's flat as a pancake for the song. I was talking here. Oh my God. Talking about voices in the net. You're out of focus.
I'm not. I'm out of existence.
I saw you in there. So that's it for Choronzon, and I hope you listen to it and enjoy it as much as I do. It won't take very long. Next time, we're going to head east to where it's flat as a pancake for the song Never Been Any Reason. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.